The Rangers turn in another brutal effort for approximately 45 minutes, yet Igor Shesterkin somehow carries this team to a 5-3 win over the Penguins. Let's try to make some sense out of it.
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1255 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, and we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So one of these stranger Ranger games, or at least one of the more bizarre Ranger wins in recent history, if not in all of team history, just an absolute anomaly of a hockey game yesterday. I can't remember ever seeing a hockey game that went quite like that one did yesterday, at least not for the Rangers. And, maybe it exists somewhere out there, but this was a very, very unique game, and that the Rangers just did everything they could to lose it. And so too seemingly did the Penguins. The Penguins were obviously hurt by their goalie not being able to make a save, while the Rangers were carried by their goalie standing on his head and doing a complete 180 versus what we saw the day before when Igor absolutely got lit up against the Buffalo Sabres and got yanked out of that game after giving up 5 goals in the first period. But that's actually where we're going to start today. Going to talk about Igor Shesterkin and his very impressive, 24-hour turnaround. In fact, less than 24 hours, slightly less. And just talk about how well he did in this game and why that was the right decision to go back to Igor to make the start in this one rather than, going with Quick for the start here against the Penguins. So we're going to discuss that first. We're also going to talk about another very concerning effort by this Ranger team. Now, they did step things up finally in the last 15 minutes, and maybe you can get away with that against a team like the Penguins, as the Rangers did yesterday, especially when Igor's got his A game. But the Rangers are aware of this too. They made it clear after the game. It's clearly not a recipe for long-term success. So we'll talk about all that. And also, at the end of this episode, I'm going to talk about why I really don't feel that much different about this team and why I still think the Rangers should not be buying. If anything, they should be selling. Certainly the UFAs, they're on expiring contracts anyway. I think it's time to probably part ways with them. But let's start right off the bat here with Igor Shesterkin. You will not see a goalie at any level of hockey do more of a 180 from one day to the next than what we saw from Igor Shesterkin here. Like I said, against Buffalo, I thought he was absolutely brutal. Just a lot of soft goals, a lot of instances where it looked like he simply was not ready to make a save and just kind of got caught flat-footed. I thought that was his worst performance of the season. You fast forward, like I said, just a day later, and he stands on his head, puts on an absolute goaltending clinic, and essentially carries the Rangers to this 5-3 win over the Penguins. The absolute worst of Igor Shesterkin, followed by the absolute best out of Igor Shesterkin. And like I said, I think there's a very strong case to make that he followed up what I think was his worst game of the season with what was probably his best game of the season. He was fantastic. Now, I realize when it comes to the Ranger opponents over the weekend, neither one of these teams are exactly bona fide Stanley Cup contenders, but that doesn't make what I said any less true. Worst game of the season for Igor, followed by his best game of the season. And it's kind of unique how we even got to this situation where Igor ended up starting both games of the back-to-back here. I guess we don't know 100% sure. I never saw the Rangers say that the plan was for Igor to get one game and for Quick to get the other one, but typically when it comes to back-to-backs, that's what we've seen the Rangers do, and that's how most hockey teams tend to operate these days. When there's a back-to-back, you throw the backup goalie in for, one of the two games. But how we got here was still very unique because, again, we saw Igor get absolutely lit up against Buffalo. He gives up the 5 goals. He doesn't even make it through the first period. Jonathan Quick handles the last 2 periods plus of that game. And it's because of that. It's because of Igor getting such a quick hook in that game why the Rangers went back to him in this game. Now, again, we don't know that 100% for sure, but if we go by their track record, that's how the Rangers tend to operate. If there's a back-to-back, each goalie does get one game. So, I mean, it's just strange because if he didn't play so badly against Buffalo, then he would have never gotten this chance against Pittsburgh to go out there and have the kind of game that he did. And I realize there's a lot of Ranger fans going into this game that had some reservations about this. Igor just got lit up yesterday and he's not having his best season. And why would you go back to him? Quick was better in relief than Igor was at the start of that game. And that stuff is all true. But And for the record, I was right there with you. When I first saw that Igor was going to start this game, I'm thinking, like, what is this? He just got annihilated, and now Jonathan Quick has to lose his start because of how bad Igor was the day before. So I was there, but I quickly kind of did a 180. Just like Igor did a 180, I did a 180 because it goes back to something that I was talking about before the Four Nations break. And obviously, the Rangers are in this situation where they're a couple of points out of the playoffs trying to get in. It's currently 2 points, for anyone that might be wondering. They're 2 points out of the final wildcard spot. But it goes back to something I discussed before the Four Nations break, and that is that if the Rangers are going to do anything noteworthy this season, as it pertains to at least getting into the playoffs, being competitive in the playoffs, having a chance to win a series or more in the playoffs, if there's any snowball's chance in hell of that happening, it lives and dies with Igor Shesterkin. Because at this point of the season, you guys have watched this team just like I have. There's no way to fix every single thing that's wrong with this team between now and the time that the playoffs start. That's assuming you even make the playoffs, which again is far from a sure bet, especially after what we've seen over the weekend and how the Rangers played in these 2 games against weaker opponents. But again, there's no way to fix everything that's bad about this team. There are too many red flags to count. The forecheck and the back check both leave something to be desired. The intensity level far too often is just not where it needs to be from the players on this team. The leadership has seen certainly better days when it comes to New York Ranger hockey. I mentioned yesterday after the loss against Buffalo, and it applies to this game against Pittsburgh. I know the Rangers won the game, but it still applies. This team does everything slow. They skate slow. They react slow. They change on the fly slow. They just constantly look like they're moving in slow motion out there. They have bad starts to games. They fall asleep at the end of periods, the beginning of periods. The power play all of a sudden is mediocre at best. They're down to number 17 in the league. So that's been an issue too. And that was one of the things that, you could always count on the power play with this team, right? Coming into the season, like that was certainly going to be a strength, and it hasn't been. So, you look at all these issues and you look at the fact that nearly every single player on this team is having a worse season this year than they had last year. There's no way you can fix all these issues between now and the time that the playoffs start. They haven't done it all season. They're not going to suddenly figure it out now. At least I don't think so. It would take a miracle to fix everything that I just listed. But as we know, Igor Shesterkin can be a big-time X factor for the Rangers. That's why I said that all their hopes and dreams and whatever they can possibly even hope to accomplish this season, it lives and dies with Igor, because he can at least mask some of these things. I don't know that he can mask all of them. That's a lot to ask of any one player, even a guy that has been largely an outstanding goalie since he's come into the NHL. This is clearly not his best season, but we know that he can play like this. He can play the way that he just did against Pittsburgh yesterday. He's got it in him. And on top of all that, he has been absolutely money in the playoffs for his career. So if the Rangers are going to get there, Igor Shesterkin is going to have to shoulder the load to even make it. And then as far as what they do, if they do get there, Igor, once again, is going to be the most important player on the ice for the New York Rangers and the ultimate X factor for this team. If they're going to have any hope of doing anything, even making it there, first of all, and then making some noise once they do get there, it's going to be Igor Shesterkin. And, one other thing I'll throw out here. Let's just have some fun. Let's just say the Rangers actually make the playoffs. Let's say they pull it off. They storm their way in. They probably, knowing them, they won't clinch until the last day of the season. They'll probably give us a heart attack. They'll end up in like a 7-round shootout, and then they'll finally get in. But if they were to do that, if they were to get that last playoff spot, then the matchup very likely, or, at least very conceivably, would be against the Washington Capitals, who have the best record in the Eastern Conference right now. The opposing goalie would probably be Logan Thompson. Thompson has 32 games for the Capitals this year. Charlie Lindgren has 26, but it feels like it would be Thompson. He's started more games and does have better numbers than Lindgren does. Thompson's a great goalie. Probably somebody that has been a little bit underrated throughout his career. Has a goals against average of .225, a save percentage of .920 this season. But look at his playoff track record. There's not much of one. He's played a grand total of 4 playoff games. They were all last year with Vegas. He did well, 2-2 with a .235 goals against and a .921 save percentage, but he does not have the extensive track record and the extensive success record that Igor Shesterkin has in the postseason. Nobody would argue that. Charlie Lindgren, if they want to go to him, he's got 4 career playoff games. They were all against the Rangers last year, and he lost all 4 of them. Now, that was a mismatch last year. You could argue it'll be a mismatch this year. It's just that the roles have been reversed. The Capitals are the top team, and the Rangers would be the team, barely eking their way into the playoffs. But, I mean, that's an X factor there. I think, going into that playoff series, despite Igor having a subpar season by his standards, despite Logan Thompson having a very good season, you look at the playoff track record, that's something that you could talk your way into believing that, well, maybe the Rangers at least have a chance here. But of course, we are getting very much ahead of ourselves. It'd be nice if the Rangers can play a complete 60 between now and then, do something to convince this front office that they shouldn't sell like crazy at the trade deadline, which I kind of think they should. I think they should move all of the impending UFAs. We're going to elaborate on that in a little bit, and even listen to some offers on some other guys that aren't necessarily impending UFAs. But like I said, we will discuss that in greater detail in just a little bit. But you got to give Igor his props for this game. I know it's been an up and down season for him at best, but he ends up with 36 saves on 39 shots. Really held up on some chaotic sequences in this game. There were some scrambles in front of the Ranger net, and the Penguins looking for that stuff-in goal, and he was able to keep it out. We saw multiple instances of that at the very end of this game when the Rangers are clinging to that one-goal lead. Made some really clutch saves. We're going to discuss that in greater detail when we talk about, in just a minute here, the Rangers' overall effort or lack thereof for the majority of this game. We'll get to all that stuff in just a second. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. We've all been in a spot where you need the right hire, like yesterday. The pressure's on, and every day without the right person is a setback. That's exactly when Indeed's sponsored jobs come in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now, you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. All right, let's go and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Huge shout out to the everydayers, as always, for sticking with this team, sticking with this podcast throughout this entire roller coaster of a season that we are currently experiencing. The Rangers are going to be back in action against the Islanders on Tuesday at 7:30. Another obviously huge game between two teams on the outside of the playoff picture looking in. And we're going to be doing a special crossover edition with Gil Martin from Locked On New York Islanders. That'll be the next episode after this one. And obviously, we'll get that posted before the puck drops on Tuesday night. But for right now, let's talk about the Ranger effort in this game, or frankly, the lack thereof. And I guess the one sort of good period that they played, the third period. And even in that one, they gave up 2 early goals. That's about as good as it gets for the Rangers right now. But, one thing that really stood out to me, I mean, there was a lot, but we get to the halfway point of this game. The Rangers have 5 shots on goal. They have 5 shots on goal. All 5 of them were in the first period. So in the second period here, they ended up going about 15 minutes before they finally put a shot on goal. And when it happened, it was Braden Schneider who got the shot on goal. Schneider's in the offensive zone. The puck's along the boards, and he basically just sent it toward the net. It wasn't exactly a high danger scoring chance. And I'm not upset with Schneider for doing that. At a certain point, somebody's got to put the puck in the general direction of the net, and he did that. But just the fact that it took that long to get a single shot on goal, that lets you know exactly how the second period went for the New York Rangers. But at the midway point of this game, again, Rangers have 5 shots on goal. And keep in mind, this is against a Pittsburgh team that the day before this one, they, just like the Rangers, allowed 8 goals. The Penguins did it against the Capitals, who are a considerably better team than the Sabres, which is the team that did it to the Rangers. But even still, the Penguins allowed 8 goals against the Capitals. You're up against this defensive juggernaut of a team, and you've mustered a grand total of 5 shots on goal by the midway point of this game. And by that same token, the Penguins at this point had 26 shots on goal. So at the exact halfway point of this game, the Rangers were on pace to get outshot. Are you sitting down? If you're driving, you might want to pull over. They were on pace to get outshot 52-10. Let that sink in for a second. 52-10. That's the way this game was going, and yet the Rangers were tied, and they ended up taking the lead later in this abysmal second period that I'm talking about here. The one where, JT Miller went up the right side, 2-on-1. He's got Lafreniere. I'm glad he didn't try to force a pass here. The defenseman had position, and the Rangers are just allergic to shooting the puck in general. So it was nice to see somebody actually take a shot. JT Miller did it. He scored. He gave the Rangers the 2-1 lead. And then we had a kind of a up and down third period where it was obviously back and forth, and this game kind of snapped out of its coma a little bit. Certainly the Rangers did. But yeah, that's just wild. Halfway through the game, you're on pace to get outshot 52-10. The shots on goal for the Rangers in this game by period, 5 in the first period, 4 in the second period, 7 in the third period. They had 16 shots on goal. That's it. And something else that I've noticed recently, and we saw this against Buffalo, and we saw this in some games before the break as well. Do the Rangers ever get more than like 5 shots on goal in the first period? It just feels like they're always asleep at the wheel when the game starts. And the few times that they do actually get the puck out of their own zone, the few times that they actually do have an offensive zone possession that lasts for longer than like 5 seconds, they don't shoot. They don't even attempt to shoot. It's not even like they're shooting wide. I mean, there were some times against Buffalo early in that game. There were a couple of shots that went wide in that game, but for the most part, they're just not shooting. It's not a case of shooting wide. It's not a case of like shots being blocked or anything like that. They don't shoot the puck. Kind of hard to score. I don't know why these guys are constantly passing and constantly looking for that perfect opportunity. The way things are going lately, get the puck toward the net and take your chances. And that's what the Rangers did a little bit in the third period. I mean, even then, they only ended up with 7 shots on goal, but at least they converted a few of them, and that goes to show, especially, I mean, Pittsburgh's goalie is awful. He's had a rough season. He was bad in this game. So test this guy. If there's ever a time to put the puck at the net and just shoot wildly from every angle on the rink, this is the game to do it. And they still didn't want to do it until they finally did in the third period. And lo and behold, they actually score a couple of goals. And the JT Miller goal, of course, late in the second period as well. But, it's funny. I'm on social media watching this game and just kind of seeing everybody generally just be disgusted with the Rangers. I mean, that's basically how it went yesterday. And I do see a tweet from Vince Mercogliano. He mentioned something here that the second period he felt was maybe even the second period in the game against Pittsburgh was maybe even worse than the first period against Buffalo. And at first glance, it's like, oh, no, come on. Like 5 goals against Buffalo, it can't get any worse than that. I think he might be right. The Rangers were so lethargic, so lackluster, so unwilling to skate, so unwilling to do anything other than just stand there and watch Igor stand on his head. It honestly might have been worse. I realized, from a scoring perspective, it wasn't. And of course, the Rangers actually ended up winning that period on the late goal by JT Miller, which makes it even more insane. But yeah, man, I mean, the effort was just as low as it's been all season, that second period yesterday. And that's saying a lot with this Ranger team. But Igor obviously was up to the task. He kept the puck out. I will say, the Rangers did ramp up the overall effort in the third period, and specifically, I think the defensive effort. Now, not when it started, because obviously the Penguins got 2 goals very early in the third period. Penguins were down 2-1. They score twice in the first, 3:30 or whatever it was. They take the 3-2 lead. But after that Shea goal put the Penguins up 3-2, the Penguins went basically 10 minutes without a single shot on goal. It was almost 10 minutes right on the dot. It was like 9:56 or something like that. But you get the idea. The Rangers obviously shut things down defensively, and the Rangers also blocked a ton of shots in the third period, which was a very nice to see as well. It wasn't really a situation where the Rangers ended up with a high block shot total for the game. They only had 18. Again, not a crazy high amount, but 12 of them occurred in the third period. And that also contributed to the Penguins going, such a long stretch of time there without getting a single shot on net. So it was nice to see the Rangers step up in that regard. But none of these shot blocks were as big as the one that Will Borgen made at the very end of this game. And the way things have gone for the Rangers, you're kind of just waiting for something bad to happen. And it was made even more ominous by the fact that the Rangers missed an empty net goal by about an inch, if that. The Penguins pull their goalie down by a goal with 1:40 to go. You've got Cooley shooting the puck out of the Rangers zone all the way down the ice. It was deflected by a Penguin on the way there, but the puck basically just clangs off of the bar, or the post rather, and just shoots back in the other direction. So you're that close to basically sealing the game. And obviously you're not able to do it. And the Penguins get the puck back into the Rangers zone. And a couple of really nice saves by Igor here. He's able to stretch out with the left pad, prevent an opportunity, but the Penguins keep the puck. They go around the other side, and Igor's not there. And so the Penguins are bringing it back in front. Kevin Hayes has a chance to tie the game. And given the fact that he used to play for the Rangers, at this point, I'm basically putting a goal on the board for the Penguins. But Will Borgen made sure that didn't happen. He got in position. He dropped down, basically just smothered the shot, kind of just improvised, kept the puck out. But it worked, and then Igor was eventually able to cover it. So a phenomenal play there by Will Borgen. And, I talked about the block shots, none bigger than this one by Borgen. Penguins take a timeout with 55 seconds to go. And then we're getting down to about 30 seconds to go here, and we got to give some props to K'Andre Miller. I thought he made a really nice play in this situation in the game, obviously. Huge part in the game. You've got the Penguins kind of scrambling in the Ranger zone, and Bunting is in front of the net, and we know he likes to cause chaos. Miller, the puck's going toward Bunting, and Miller just checks him and puts him right on his back. Just took him completely out of the play. And that's the kind of thing that I think kind of splits the fans about K'Andre Miller, because he's got this in him. He can do things like this. He can make plays like this. He can use his size and his strength to his advantage. And there's too many games and too many instances where he simply does not do it. But he's capable. We've seen him do things like this in the past. And obviously this is crunch time. So maybe that kind of gave him the little kick that he needed to get going a little bit. I mean, every Ranger in this game needed to get going a little bit, but he's certainly one of them. And he puts his guy down, fought on his back right on the ice, took him completely out of the play, did not allow for a chance of a deflection, a stuffing goal, whatever it might have been. Just a really nice, solid hit by K'Andre Miller there, and the kind of thing that makes you wonder why we don't see more of that with K'Andre Miller. Miller is almost the Kreider of defensemen, because both of them obviously have incredible talent. Kreider's been in the league for a long time. I think Miller's looking at a very long career for himself as well. But both of them always leave you wanting more. Both of them make you think that they're capable of more. They kind of just limit themselves. Kreider just kind of hangs out around the net and looks for the tip in goal. And Miller, they don't call him K-Poke for nothing. I mean, I don't really like that nickname because I don't want to just take shots at the guy. But that's what Raider fans have called him, because he goes to that poke check. And yes, he can use that to his advantage for sure. And obviously he's very tall. He's got a very long reach. By all means, do it. But take the body, too. Play physical, because K'Andre Miller can absolutely do it. And we saw it here, and we saw it at a big spot in the game. And, who's to say what happens if he doesn't put Bunting down on that play? Bunting's still in the play. Those are the kind of goals that he likes to score, those greasy goals in deep. Miller made sure it didn't happen. So that was huge. Huge couple of plays there. First by Borgen, then by K'Andre Miller very late in this game. And Igor took care of everything else, as we've already very well established. And speaking of, taking care of business, got to give some props to Jimmy Vesey and Adam Fox. The Rangers went down 3-2. Both of these guys scored goals. Vesey receives a nice pass from Vincent Trocheck across the ice, basically just kind of hits the brakes and then takes a shot and scores. And that was pretty much all there was to it. I think that it's probably one that other goalies would have had, but be that as it may, he shot and scored. And then we had Adam Fox. Look, a lot of us have been tough on Adam Fox, myself included. Thought he had a tough tournament for Team USA, and I thought he had a miserable game against the Buffalo Sabres. But he comes through with a big-time goal here. He leads the breakout out of the Ranger zone, gets it over to Smith along the board. Smith dishes back to Fox into the offensive zone. Fox gets to the good spot on the ice, right there in the slot, the high danger scoring area, and he lets it fly and he scores. And, Adam Fox needed that about as much as anybody. Not just a goal. I mean, he needed a goal in general, but a clutch goal like this, absolutely huge. So somehow, some way, they found a way to get it done. But despite everything I just said, and despite the fact that it's always nice to win, it's always nice to see the Rangers beat a division rival such as the Penguins, it doesn't really change where I stand with this team and what I think their approach should be as the trade deadline approaches here. And I'm going to discuss what I mean by that in just a second. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up today's episode by talking a little bit about what I think the Rangers' approach should be to the trade deadline here. We are now, of course, less than 2 weeks away. During the break, going into the Four Nations face-off, I looked at the schedule, as I'm sure a lot of you did as well, and I saw that the Rangers, 7 games coming out of the Four Nations break before the trade deadline. They've got 7 games to get it right. They've got 7 games to figure it out. They've got 7 games to convince upper management and whatnot that this is a team to invest in and not sell away all these pieces and basically just push forward and try to get this team into the playoffs. Seeing what I've seen, what we've all seen over the weekend here, I don't really need to see the other 5 games. Now, of course, if they go 5-0, maybe I feel a little bit differently. But the way things stand right now, I feel like it's become pretty obvious that this is not a team that is going to. I mean, you can never say never, but it's not a team that's giving us any reason to believe that they're going to go on some crazy run to, first of all, just get into the playoffs. And secondly, do something of any noteworthiness once they get there. Just not seeing it. We went through the whole laundry list of things that this team has done poorly all season, that they're continuing to do poorly. We don't have to do it again, but it's getting to the point where I watch this team, and this is the kind of lackluster hockey that they've played coming out of the break, and it's just like, all right, well, if that didn't do it, if they weren't coming out of the break with their heads on fire, then clearly it's not going to happen. And clearly the thing to do here is to sell. At the very least, you got to sell the UFAs. And that was a question going into the break. You know, the three big UFAs, as far as skaters are concerned, because Jonathan Quick is also a UFA, but I'm not talking about trading him. The three big skaters are VZ, are Riley Smith, and of course, Ryan Lindgren. To me, all three of those guys should be moved. And it's not even that those three guys specifically did anything egregiously wrong in these two games. I mean, Jimmy VZ didn't even play in the first one. And the second one, he scored what turned out to be, it was a game tying goal. Fox got the game winner, but he still came through with a clutch goal for the Rangers there. Riley Smith, I mean, he had an assist on the Fox game winner. And Ryan Lindgren, I mean, he's doing the best he can out there. He took a vicious cross check against Buffalo. Rangers didn't respond to that. It's nothing really against these three players personally, but it's just the fact that all three of these guys are UFAs at the end of the season. And so the thing to do, at least for my money, is to trade them now and get something for them rather than just letting them walk in free agency, because there is little to no chance. And you guys might feel differently. Let me know if you do. But to me, there is little to no chance that any of these three players is going to be re-signed by the Rangers at the end of this season. Honestly, the one that I would give the biggest chance to, the most likely scenario as far as maybe being re-signed when the season ends, is Jimmy VZ. And the reason for that is because he wouldn't cost that much. So you can let him walk in free agency and sign another fourth line type player to essentially be the new Jimmy VZ, or you can keep Jimmy VZ in the fold. So that's possible that maybe Jimmy VZ would stick around after this season comes and goes. But I'm not really seeing it. And I'm certainly not seeing it with Ryan Lindgren and Riley Smith. So to me, deal these guys, get what you can get for them in terms of probably draft picks. You know, I think that's the thing to do right now. The cupboard's a little bare when it comes to Ranger draft picks over the next bunch of seasons here. Can you get a second round pick for either one of these guys? I mean, maybe. You know, it's so hard to really figure out the NHL trade market, because when you think you've got it all figured out, then you see Tanner Jeannot gets 5 draft picks and a prospect in exchange for him when he was traded a couple of years ago. But yeah, I mean, to me, that's what you've got to do. You've got to move these guys, and you've got to open up the door for some younger and hungrier players. If you move Jimmy VZ and Riley Smith, then you got to figure the two guys that are probably going to slot in there are Brett Berard and Brandon Hoffman. Fine. Awesome. Let's do it. Brandon Hoffman has been on an absolute heater with Hartford. He was up for 3 games last year, hasn't played with the team this year. It's time to bring him up and see what he can do. It's time to give him his shot. And if he plays well enough this season, then he probably has an inside track to a roster spot at the start of next season. Brett Berard, it's basically the same thing. Obviously, he was up earlier this year, and I think overall did fairly well. And he's been sent back down to Hartford. He had to deal with an injury for a little while there as well. But it's time for him to be back up. I don't know that going from VZ and Smith to Berard and Hoffman would even really be a downgrade, especially when you consider the fact that these are young players. You talk about calling up players looking for a spark, looking for that little jolt of energy. They can bring that to the table as well. Brett Berard is a ball of energy out there, and the Rangers could sorely use a player like that right now. So there's that to consider. And if Ryan Lindgren gets traded, I mean, the Rangers will fight this kicking and screaming, but I think that would mean Zach Jones is going to go back into the lineup. I think. Or maybe they would go with Matthew Robertson. That's fine too. Let's see what Robertson can do. Let's at least give him a shot. Robertson was called up. He's still on the NHL roster, at least as of this recording. He was actually on the ice for warmups. Of course, he did not play. But yeah, to me, I mean, there's no reason at this point not to move the UFAs. And if you want to take things a step further, you could maybe move some of the guys that aren't necessarily UFAs. If I'm the Rangers, I'm listening to offers on just about everybody. All the veteran players for sure. You know, Keandre Miller, again, made a huge play at the end of this game. That was awesome to see. I think there's certainly still some upside in his game. as frustrating as he can be at times. But I'm not going to hang up the phone if another GM calls me and asks about K'Andre Miller and what it would take to land him. I'm going to hear him out for sure. K'Andre Miller is not having his best season. And again, there was that report that Miller and his camp are looking for a significant raise next season. Do the Rangers want to give him that raise? We'll see. The thing that might benefit K'Andre Miller in terms of the Rangers maybe meeting his demands and meeting his price is the very simple fact that the Rangers have a lot of uncertainty on their blue line. We've talked about this before, too. The only defensemen under contract next year are Adam Fox and Will Borgen. That's it. So all these moving pieces, Trouba's gone, Lindgren's going to be gone, Zach Jones, he's either going to be gone or they're not going to play him anyway, so you can't really count him. So yeah, maybe that works in K'Andre Miller's favor. They got to hang on to somebody, right? They got to fill out the blue line somehow. That could work in his favor. We'll see. But again, I'm certainly listening to offers if I'm Chris Drury and somebody calls me about K'Andre Miller. Same thing with Chris Kreider. Kreider, I still maintain that he will make it through this season. I am not convinced that Chris Kreider is a Ranger on opening night next season because his full no move clause did drop down to either a 15 or 16 team no move clause. I'd have to look it up to know for sure. But the bottom line, you can basically deal with about half the teams in the NHL if you're the Rangers. What can Kreider get you? I don't know. But we did just see a situation where Jacob Trouba got this team multiple assets. And Trouba makes more money per season than Kreider does. And arguably, his game has slipped even more than Chris Kreider. It's a little bit apples and oranges because we're comparing a defenseman to a forward. But if you can get stuff back, multiple things for Jacob Trouba, you get Vakanainen, you get a 3rd-round pick and a 5th-round pick. I'm pretty sure that was the return. It was 2 draft picks for sure. I mean, I think you should be able to get something for Kreider. It's not a situation where you're going to have to attach a sweetener or, retain a whole bunch of salary or anything like that. I think you should be able to get something. So not necessarily pushing Kreider out the door, but again, if somebody calls, you got to do your due diligence and at least talk to that GM and see what it's going to take, see what they're willing to give up to get him. And I do see people throwing out, Igor and Fox as maybe trade one of them before their full no moves, kick in. I'm not there yet. I don't think the Rangers are there yet. I don't think anything like that is going to happen. But I guess nothing could ever be completely ruled out, right? So we'll see. But I think, there's certainly the UFAs are the ones that I think absolutely should and hopefully will be moved. And then I think, if you're the Rangers, once again, you should be listening to offers on guys like Kreider, on guys like K'Andre Miller, certainly on somebody like Zach Jones for sure. But we'll see how the Rangers look to play it. Going to be a fascinating week and a half here for this franchise moving forward. But yep, we can call it there. If you guys would like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely give us a follow on Twitter as well, @jchick17. Once again, that is @JCHIK17. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.